Welcome to another edition of the Jungle Juice podcast. I'm Sam Gormley. He's Mick Nelson. Mick, happy. Listen, here's the fact of the matter. We've made it through the offseason. It's no more. We're back, baby.
Yeah, we're going to have things to talk about now, which is nice. Also, happy National Tequila Day, by the way.
Interesting. I know it's also National Drive-Through Day, so I celebrated by getting myself some Wendy's for lunch because I felt like I had to, right?
Did you get a biggie bag?
No, I did. On the app, they have a good, 2 for $6. So I got myself a Dave single and some nuggets. It was good. And then they gave me
nugs yet?
What's that? No, I've not. But I love it when restaurants, because I don't know how you are. I think you are more of a sauce person than I am as far as the amount that you use. I think that's a fair assessment, right?
Kind of. I don't know. I don't like my wings too saucy. Like, I'd rather have them be more dry than saucy.
But what's funny is that so I ordered, some of their ghost pepper ranch, and this is they gave me this plus the one that I used. So that's 4 different containers, and I was just kind of like, is that enough? Like, was that a little bit extra?
Yeah,
like,
I'm not the ranch. That's plenty. That is
yes, and it's not like it's super spicy, but it still was like, okay.
The heat probably kind of sneaks up after having a couple doses of it, I guess.
To me, it's the perfect balance because I'm not the kind of person that wants to be in pain when I eat. But I like it.
Yeah.
I like it when it just kind of says, "Hey, I'm here. Remember me." And that's kind of how this is, and it's really nice. But that's not necessarily what we were here to talk about. We are going to be talking about food a little bit later on in the pod, but that's for later because mock turtle soup, it came out. We get to learn about what that is. But on the show today, we've got a lot to talk about, a lot to get into. Joe Burrow, he's done something with his hair. We're going to have to dive into that. Didn't necessarily think we were going to be doing that much into his hair. We thought we did enough last week. Nope. He took it to a whole new level. We'll talk about that. Ring of Honor, that was officially released. We'll discuss that. Mock Turtle Soup happened. There were some big news that Mike Brown made. He apparently got himself in trouble, but I don't really know that he did. T. Higgins spoke. There's all sorts of stuff. And then we're going to dive all the way into the Bengals offense as well. Some of the stats that you should know, some of the questions that might be had, all of that coming up here today. We want to invite you to follow us on our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Remember also to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcasting platform. That's how more people can find our show. So we appreciate everyone who has been able to join us today. But Mick, we are officially 46 days away until kickoff. So happy Clark Harris, Pete Johnson, and Blue Adams day away. Remember Blue Adams, Bengals legend?
When did he play?
2007.
Yeah, I don't remember him, and he actually played in the time that I'd be watching the team.
I think he played in one game. He went to UC, and Blue is not his real name. And it was just one of those things that when I saw his name, I was like, I actually kind of remember you. And I clicked on him. I was like, okay, I think I remember you existed. And then, of course, 46 was taken for a long time with Clark Harris.
Yeah.
So it's weird not having
his number.
Is he a Ring of Honor? Is he a Ring of Honor candidate?
It's not like the number 46 is a very attractive number for players to pick, so might as well retire it.
If anybody, it should probably be Pete Johnson. He had a really good career for the Bengals, and I don't know how Pete would necessarily feel if they decided to
retire it for both guys then. Yeah,
do a co-retirement ceremony. I guess that works. Big news of the week, Mick, and we got to start it off right off the bat because there is huge news. It's the biggest news, and it literally broke the internet when it happened because I was expecting the picture of Joe Burrow's hair to come. I was waiting for it, but I was expecting it just to be a buzz cut and us all go, okay, that makes sense. And then this was posted, and I don't know about you, but my first reaction was, I'm sorry, what? What was your first reaction?
No, I was a big fan of it. So there's a message behind this, right? The last time Joe Burrow had this haircut was when he was in high school. And if anybody doesn't know the high school story with Joe Burrow, Uh, Joe Burrow, I think, took Athens High School to lengths that I don't think the school has really ever seen before in terms of their success on the football field, and they came so close to winning their high school state championship. I think, if I remember correctly, I think Joe had an interception in that game that kind of cost the game. So I think that there is a message. There is a clear message behind this hairdo, and that is there is unfinished business in the mind of Burrow.
His reasoning today that he gave during his press conference, and you can buy it or you can't. First off was he said he just, quote, got bored. Just because every guy, when he gets bored, most of us, when we get bored, we're just playing college football 25. Nope, he decides to bleach his hair. But then he also said that he's doing it because BJ Hill said that he would do it too if he did. So Joe Burrow is now putting the call out to BJ Hill to force him to get the same haircut.
Does BJ Hill have any hair? I thought he was bald.
They shaved his head, if you remember, at the end of last year, or it was prior
Is that
to
when
last
Pratt
season.
Signed?
Exactly.
Signed? Okay.
Exactly. But I think he's kind of kept it
got
back.
Hair
but
now? Okay.
BJ Hill and the Joe Burrow hair. But I just, for one, I find it hilarious on how much people care on both sides, but then also the people that are like, why do you care? Oh, and I just find it funny.
I just love that we're going from like one extreme to the other, right? If you remember the fake
yes,
Joe Burrow, Anakin Skywalker hair, which honestly looks pretty dope. I wish that was the case, but and I think he also said he would love to have that haircut too, but it would take a while for him to grow it out. But I just love that we went from that extreme of that meme to this. I just think it's hilarious.
And here we go, Mick. I'm gonna leave this up to you. If
how many bleached hairdos do you think we're gonna see at tailgates?
Well, see, this is exactly what I was gonna leave to you. And I'll put this out here, and I think we can both agree to this. If Burrow keeps this hair through the season and the Bengals win the Super Bowl, are we both bleaching our hair?
I think I'd have to clear it with my employer. But
I mean, let's be real. You're not worried about clearing it with your employer. You're worried about clearing it with your wife probably first.
My wife, so I bleached my hair once in college, right? And it was a very short time.
I remember this.
My wife is the one that it was for a couple days, and then I dyed it back because I was like, it looks ridiculous. But yeah, my wife actually was the one that bleached my hair.
Really?
In freshman year, yeah.
So there is precedent.
There is precedent.
Interesting. I don't know. I saw somebody put that comment out there saying, the Bengals Super Bowl parade would literally just be filled with bleached hair. But Burrow said that he's not sure it's going to stay. If anything else, he might let it grow out and change and turn it into frosted tips, which is just hilarious. And I agree kind of with Andrew said. I'm not doing that. That was high school days.
That's just evidence that the fashion or styles are just cyclical then, because frosted tips were a huge thing back in the early
20 years
2000s,
ago,
late 90s,
boy bands and so on. And Joe Burrow, with his fashion background now, is kind of like he's in a boy band of his own. And then Jamar Chase, he has his head shaved too. T. Higgins has his head shaved. It's all like it's business, and I don't know how much you can actually read into it, but people are ready to go. But that's the biggest news of the week. There is, I guess, some other things like the Ring of Honor last week was released. Corey Dillon, we both expected to be in the Ring of Honor. Mick, you've given your opinions on Corey Dillon. We don't need to necessarily get into that again. But am I not wrong? And nothing against Tim Krumrie. He has a great case as maybe being the best nose tackle in Bengals history. DJ Reader and him are, probably 1A and 1B in that category. But was it not a little bit of a surprise that he got in over Lamar Parrish or Dave Lapham or Jim Breach or some of the other guys on the list?
I don't think it was much a surprise. Actually, Tim Krumrie was my second person that wasn't Lamar Parrish out of the eligible people. He had a very good career with the Cincinnati Bengals. First team All-Pro in 1988, second team All-Pro in 87. Had very high level play in the late 80s. I think people remember him most for the gruesome leg injury that he had in the Super Bowl. But I think he is probably the best nose tackle of all time for the Bengals. And has been, definitely one of the the big faces of the franchise. So yeah, I think that I think that it wasn't as out of left field as some people would think it was.
I do know that, one of the questions that I know fans like to do, not as much anymore now that we're past the offseason, because I think now we can kind of really start talking about the nitty-gritty, but one of the favorite offseason questions that I know podcasts like to do is, if you can add one player from Bengals history to this Bengals team, who are you adding? Tim Crumry might be the right answer.
Well, yeah, we need a nose tackle. So, yeah, give me Tim Crumry.
Yeah. I mean, you can say Anthony Munoz, just because he's the greatest offensive lineman of all, potentially the greatest offensive lineman of all time out of any, of the positions on there. But it'd be tough not to say with just a solid nose tackle right in the middle. And I've heard great things, like Andrew says here, that he is a super, super nice guy. So I'm excited that they both will get their moment when the Bengals take on the Commanders. That will be Monday Night Football. That game there in September probably will also be a white Bengal night, I would assume. That's not been officially announced, but that's how it's been the past couple of seasons. Another big topic that we talked about on last week's show, Amarius Mims. Oh, he wasn't going to sign. Oh, he signed his deal. And I mean, it's not like there was really any doubt, but he signed it. And I'm glad, Mick, that we don't have to go through the training camp with that little, I don't really know how big of a cloud it was. It was more just one of those wispy ones, but at least it's gone and we can just focus on him preparing.
Yep. Not much else to talk about.
No, there's really not. On Monday, it was the Bengals hosting their annual media day of sorts, and it was what has been referred to as the media as Mock Turtle Soup Day. So what happens is, if you're not familiar with this, is that for as long as I know, really, you can go all the way back through the Bengals history, they have fed the media a lunch. Now, you would think, okay, what are they going to feed the media? I'm a media member. Typically, what a media meal is it's pizza, it's like some pasta, it's some chicken fingers. Like, it's pretty much, you feed the media like you'd feed a 4-year-old, because that's kind of how we eat. And listen, also because who's going to complain about chicken fingers, pizza, and pasta? Like, I'm a happy camper. Nope, the Bengals say absolutely not. We're going to make mock turtle soup instead. Mock turtle soup. So, Mick, I ask you, do you know what mock turtle soup is?
No.
Mock turtle soup. Okay, and I'm going to ask you now if you would eat this. So, for me, I want you to imagine that, to me, what this looks like, and if I was good at my job, Mick, I'd have pulled a picture of it, is it looks like Skyline chili. Like, is what it would look like, but it's in a bowl. Like, if you would just eat a bowl of chili. So, it's got ground beef, butter, celery, onion, garlic, cold water, flour, beef broth, bay leaves, tomato paste, Worcestershire sauce, thyme, hot sauce, salt, pepper, lemon juice, and cooking sherry. Now, it can be also served with hard-boiled egg and lemon on top. Would you try it?
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like a chili, honestly. I mean, some components in the chili that's missing there, but I mean, it really sounds like
it's a glorified chili.
Yeah. Fancy chili, essentially. Yeah, I'd eat it.
Yeah,
especially with an egg. That sounds really good.
Yes, and to me though, it's hilarious that the Bengals, they don't serve this in the pre-playoff press conference. No, they're serving this in the middle of July, because nothing says middle of July like hot beet soup. Just makes perfect sense. That's probably how they feel about
in the
media.
Middle of like 80% humidity.
And luckily this week hasn't been terribly hot, but there have probably been some years where it's 100 degrees and let's go in and let's eat some chili. Some big news came out of that, because this is a moment where all the coordinators talk. Zach Taylor talks, but more importantly, Mike Brown. Mike Brown, the Bengals owner, talks pretty much once a year.
Yep.
And it's this time of year. And really, a lot of it was what you could expect. But the biggest news that he made was around the Jamar Chase extension, where his quote was, "Maybe it'll take longer than we wish." The long story short with what Mike Brown said in this press conference is that it's probably not going to get done right now. Jamar Chase wants to be paid high. We want to pay him high. So it's probably going to be a next offseason thing.
Yeah.
And the wildest part is that people were blowing up and ripping him about it. And I'm just kind of like, this wasn't necessarily a surprise at all.
No, I mean, there's a couple of factors. I think the big one is T's still on the team. Obviously, his contract situation has been the drama of the offseason. We all know that he is more likely than not is not going to be a Bengal after 2024. And extending Jamar while you have T tagged and him knowing that he's not going to be on the team, I think I know it's business, but I think that they do view it as potentially disrespectful to T. So I think that I think they do have T's emotions or his thoughts in mind if a contract extension were to have happened this offseason. And two, Jamar Chase wants to be the highest paid wide receiver in football. Who's the other wide receiver in football that hasn't had their extension yet?
CeeDee
Lamb. So it's going to be, we all said, oh, it's a waiting game between Jamar and Justin Jefferson. Now it's a waiting game between Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb. I think that he's going to wait for CeeDee to get his extension too, because he wants to be the highest paid receiver in football. Whether I think he should be that, I don't know. I mean, I think CeeDee and Justin Jefferson have had better top end play than Jamar, and that's no shade on Jamar at all. But yeah, that's what he's looking for.
The thing that annoyed me about this entire situation, though, and it's somebody that I actually don't mind, was I don't know if you saw the clip, and I think it was from yesterday afternoon from Adam Schefter on ESPN's NFL afternoon show. I can't remember what it's called. NFL Now, NFL Nation, whatever they call it now. I feel like it's changed names all the time. But I don't know if you saw Adam Schefter on this topic and saw the clip. But Joe Goodberry on Twitter, if you haven't seen it after the podcast today, go back and rewatch it today because I think it's fascinating. Because Adam Schefter just flat out lies about this situation. And honestly, it kind of ticked me off, and it ticked off a lot of Bengals fans. He pretty much says that just Jamar Chase right now, his contract is $1 million, which is not true.
No,
not true. It's just not true. So they're playing, and he says that's the only guaranteed money that he has. So why is he going out there for $1 million? It's just not true. He has $1 million. That is his base salary. That is true. But then he also has a signing bonus, and he has the per game bonus on top of that as well. And then on top of all of that as well is that next year he's got the 5th-year option, which he's going to be, $22, $23 million, somewhere in that realm. So, pretty much he is on the books for the Bengals for about $30 million, where Schefter just yesterday said that he's $1 million on the book. So it just kind of annoyed me with that. And it's, yeah. Because if he was talking base salaries, Jamar Chase is making more technically than Justin Jefferson this year based on just true base salaries. So if we're going to use that fact, let's make sure that we use it across all boards. But I'm not going to, that's enough me ranting about Bengals national media and the perception that for some reason people need to think that they take. I don't know. It grinds my gears, as Peter Griffin would say. Grinds my gears. The Evan McPherson extension was also a topic, and pretty much that's coming. It's going to happen. The question is just when.
Yeah.
Luckily, with a kicker, is most of those are you're just taking every other kicker's contract and you're just copying and pasting it into Evan McPherson's. It's not like there's any wild things in there. He's going to be paid as one of the better kickers in the game because he is. So luckily, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe by the time we have our next podcast, Mick, that the deal's done. It's very possible that could happen. And it's very much deserved, too, for McPherson.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, he's going to be making top-end kicker money. Now, I'm looking at the average pay per year. $6 million, Justin Tucker and Jake Elliott are tied for the highest APY amongst kickers. I would assume Evan's going to get around that. It's not a significant, very significant portion of the cap, but it's a pretty high number. Hell, we signed Cheeto Bayawuzie for just $1 million per average per year more a few years ago.
I just find it funny that we're talking like it's only, $6 million. It's not that much. It's just like, yeah. And for you, for me, for you listening, That's, it's life-changing money, and I'm really excited that Evan McPherson is going to get that. One of the things, and I don't know how much we've really talked about it in the offseason, but I know, Mick, you mentioned it as one of your concerns when we did our concerns podcast back a couple of weeks ago, is the depth at corner, especially cornerback 2, is if they're putting a lot of chips into Dax Hill and DJ Turner in wanting one of them having a big thing. And it is one of them having a big year. So what was asked by the media was, are the Bengals planning on signing a veteran corner? And Duke Tobin pretty much said that that is not in the plans. Do you think that's a good plan or not?
I'm sorry. I was reading this comment from Timothy Hook. Can you re-say that question? And then can we get on to this comment, because I just want
to... Should the Bengals sign a veteran corner?
I think if the price is right, I don't think it would hurt.
Duke Tobin said that they're probably not going to do that.
That's probably, I mean, they probably won't. But if I'm looking at, let's see if there's, let's just see who's on the last.
I think like Stephon Gilmore is out there right now. I mean, you're going to be getting a guy who's 30 plus. He is, he's aging. I don't know how much money you're going to be paying him. I'm not necessarily against it. I think it's always good to have more depth in that room. If anything else, you hope that guy would stick around and be a member of your practice squad. Now, a guy like Stephon Gilmore might not necessarily want to do that, but I still think it's not a bad thing.
Not only more depth, but I mean, that cornerback room is very young. I mean,
very young.
Very young. Your most experienced corner in that room is, I believe, Cam Taylor-Britt, who's just going into his third year. Okay, Mike Hilton. Out of the outside corners, the most experienced corner is Cam Taylor-Britt, and he's going into his third year.
But another thing with Mike Hilton that we need to also remember is that he's in the last year of his deal, so he will presumably be a free agent next year as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, looking right now, Xavier Howard is still out there, J.C. Jackson, Adoree Jackson, Stephon Gilmore, Patrick Peterson, Steven Nelson. Those are a couple of the names. Can I interest you in an Eli Apple?
No.
Those are just some of the names here that I'm looking at that are still available if you're potentially interested in signing a veteran corner. Now, I mean, Xavier Howard last year made $18 million a year. There's a 0% chance he's going to make that much. The question is how much money does he want to make? And is some money better than no money? And what is that some money amount for a guy like him? And would the Bengals be willing to pay him? And I don't know with that. And I think Riley makes a good point that they're putting a lot into the TCU kid too. He's got a high ceiling, and bringing in a veteran corner potentially forces them to cut one of those guys that they might not necessarily want to. A guy like a Josh Newton or a Dejon Anthony, or, some of these other younger guys, or even, one of the points that we made on the show last week was, the edge rusher from Ole Miss. You sign another veteran corner, that could take a position from a guy like him, because you're going to have to find somebody to cut.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the biggest thing. Joe Burrow, they said precautions will be taken. I know he said that he's expecting to take some days off throughout the first couple of weeks, but then he's going to be as normal. And he did say as well that they are planning on playing in the preseason. Now, Mick, we did a show on this last week, 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, and we both came to I think our show was, and our findings were, is that there was no correlation between them playing in the preseason actually turning into success in the opening games of the season. That was our findings. We did not necessarily say that we didn't think they should. We just said that the reasoning behind it is kind of flawed. Like, there's no real basis, at least going across it. How do you feel knowing that the Bengals are going to play some of their players in the preseason?
So like we said, there's no correlation between preseason snaps and early regular season success. So you could kind of go either way. You can either play him or don't. I don't think it really matters. I think as long as that's what the players want to do and they think that that would be beneficial to them, and that's what the coaches think, I think that, I don't really have a problem with it. Really, either way that they would have approached it.
Yeah, here's the thing: is the fans that have been the loudest about them playing. If God forbid something happens to one of, I mean, and it doesn't even need to be Burrow, Chase, Higgins, Logan Wilson, Cam Taylor-Britt, one of these guys that are hugely important to the Bengals, Ted Karras, they're going to be the first ones to criticize. Why were they playing? Why were they doing that? Why were they doing that? And I just don't know that the risk outweighs the benefit.
Yeah. I see that point as well. I think that, there's a huge risk with having these guys play. Now, how much they play in the preseason, we don't know. Dak says they'll play a little bit. If I had to guess anything, that's probably one series of downs, or not one series, one drive in the preseason.
Yeah, okay. We'll set the over/under of total series, total drives by the Bengals offense. I think probably 2.5 is a good number, and you're taking the under.
Yeah, I'll take the under.
Okay. See, I feel like 2.5. If Vegas was setting it, I feel like that's probably where they would. I feel like 1.5 would be too low. But it also wouldn't surprise me, like you said, if the Bengals really do just do one drive and they say, "Oh, look, we did it. We gave you one," just like they gave to the defense last season. They did say that the competition between Trent Brown and Amarius Mims will be a thing. I want to take this and come back to that a little bit later on when we dive into the offense, because that's a huge aspect to this offense. So I just wanted to bring that point up as something that came out of Mock Turtle Soup. The following day, yesterday, Trent Brown was placed on the non-football injury list, and Zach Taylor today said it is for, quote, tightness. What does that mean? I don't know. Tightness. That's just what he said.
I think we signed Trent Brown knowing that he was not going to be healthy at some point during the season. So maybe he's just getting it out of the way early,
Yeah, hopefully it's day one. When it comes to that, T. Higgins did talk today. They asked him, "Why did you sign?" Because I don't think either of us expected T. Higgins to be at camp right now. We were talking back 3 or 4 months ago. And his direct quote was that he was tired of the BS from fans about keeping bugging him about why he hadn't signed. So he just went ahead and did it. And then he followed it up with a really good point that I think we need to make is he said, he grew up with nothing, and now he's going to be making $22 million.
Yeah.
And to me, that's just the fact of the matter. He's not going to walk away from $22 million, especially a guy that, like he said, grew up with nothing. And I'm glad that is not another cloud that's hanging over this training camp.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much most of the news that we had. And like we said, it was a lot because these next couple of weeks are going to be a lot of these little news tidbits. And hopefully it's all positive news, but there will probably be at least something negative in these next couple of weeks. So how about we dive into the Bengals offense this year? New offensive coordinator in Dan Pitcher. We have seen this offense look incredible. I was even going in today, Mick, and I remembered that San Francisco game being really good. But I was looking at some of the gradings, and it was even better than I think I remembered it being. Like that, especially that 2-game stretch. Now, the Texans you could throw in there too, but that 2-game stretch of Bills and 49ers is probably just about as good as an offense can play against 2 really good teams.
Yeah, I think it was for that 2-week stretch, the Bengals had the best offense in the league, which just kind of proves to show when Burrow, Chase, and Higgins are healthy and on the field, the sky's the limit for this offense and what they can do. And I think with some of the additions they've made this year, in the tidbits that we've gotten from Dan Pitcher, there's going to be a little more pre-snap motion, a little more eye candy for defenses. And then you've added a few more explosive players like a Jermaine Burton, like a Mike Gesicki. I think we're going to see a different offense this season. I think it's going to be all for the better.
I agree. I agree completely. I'm really excited about this offense. Like, if they can stay healthy, this offense, I just think this has a chance. Like, you know what? And I'll even put this out here, Mick, right now. Here's my hot take. And I don't really know that this is scalding hot. The Bengals are going to need a new offensive coordinator next year. Not because Dan Pitcher gets fired, because he's going to be a head coach.
I'm going to go. That's a hot take. I don't know if I necessarily agree. Well, hello, Frank. We haven't seen you in a little bit. So thanks for joining, Frank. So
that's my take, though. You can buy it or you can sell it. And listen, here's the thing. If that's true, the Bengals are making at least the AFC Championship game, if not winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, we're at least making it to the Super Bowl. Yeah, that's. I think that would be the thing that gets Dan Pitcher the job, or that's the thing that would have to happen, is at least an AFC Championship appearance for Dan Pitcher to be getting, for him to be getting head coaching buzz, I guess. Because, I mean, think about it. We saw high level of success in 2021 and 2022 on the offense, and Brian Callahan did not get the job after those seasons, which that makes me think other teams are looking at play calling experience when they're looking to hire their next offensive-minded head coach. So I wonder if that's going to kind of...
Yeah, a lot of this, too, will depend on how Brian Callahan does in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Because if the Titans go 9-8 this year, that Zach Taylor coaching tree is going to get some eyes on it.
Yeah, well.
Now, Brian Callahan goes 2-15. Actually, the Zach Taylor, they might be saying, well, actually, Zach Taylor might be a better offensive coach than people think. If Brian Callahan did it, maybe it is Zach Taylor that's the genius over there, and it wasn't Brian Callahan. So I guess you can see a couple of different aspects with that. But yeah, I'm really excited about Dan Pitcher, and I have high expectations. And I hope I'm right, because if I'm right, that means that the Bengals are going to be really good. Thanks for watching, John, too, from Huber Heights. Let's go position by position and dive into this. And I hate that this is how we have to start when we're talking about the offense, but it's a conversation that I don't know if we've necessarily ignored, but it's something that we're going to at least have to have. And Mick, let's just say like 1 minute on this topic, because I don't want to talk a lot about it. And I'm going to ask you the question: is the Joe Burrow injury-prone statement valid?
I don't know. I really don't. That's a tough question to ask. I mean, yeah, he's had some freak injuries, like some Andrew Luck level injuries. Now, Joe Burrow just hasn't had a lacerated kidney, but he has had a throat contusion and has had a torn wrist ligament that has never been seen on an NFL quarterback. So, is he injury
appendicitis?
Appendicitis. Yeah, he also had appendicitis, which, I mean, that wasn't a football injury, but yeah, that's so. I don't want to say somebody's injury prone, but I mean, he's had some injuries over the past 4 years. Now, how much of it has been Joe Burrow and the way that he plays the quarterback position? How much of it is the offensive line? I'd say definitely the ACL was all offensive line, right? That there's no way getting around that one. But some of these other ones were just, I don't know. It's Joe Burrow giving it his all. So I think Joe Burrow, and what he said earlier in the offseason, him saying, hey, I need to listen to my body a little bit more. I don't need to, I shouldn't be testing my limits as much as I have in the past, which is how you probably avoid a calf injury that he did. I mean, what he did last year was, he tweaked his calf, put a sleeve on it. He said, yeah, I'm ready to go. And, ended up spraining it. So, yeah, I think, or straining the muscle. So I don't know if he's injury prone or not.
Or he's stubborn.
Yeah, it might just be. I think it's probably more that than the injury proneness.
Okay, let's put it this way: on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being you could not be concerned about this less, to 10 being you are losing sleep over it at night. How concerned are you about Joe Burrow's injury future, I guess we should say?
Well, I'm not going to lose sleep over somebody having injuries, so I'm not going to be too concerned about it. Injuries happen. Some people have injuries more than others, so I don't think that's something to be concerned about. Now, am I concerned that he could get injured or have another major injury that costs him a season? Yeah, I mean, it could definitely happen. It could happen to any quarterback, right? Aaron Rodgers, who's been healthy for a lot of his career, and had a torn Achilles last year. So yeah, I think that just it can happen with anybody. Now, we saw with Zach Taylor's offense last year of how they changed their identity with Jake Browning, that they could have sustained levels of success even when Burrow's not on the field. And I think that's what matters more than anything, is keeping the team together and having high quality play out of them, even in the event that Joe could get injured. So I'm not too concerned about it. I think
would you have a number?
We'll say 5. Just say very indifferent on it. So, but yeah, I think what matters more is how the coaching staff responds, how the organization is as a whole, and how they can kind of rebound from something like that. And they showed last year that they could do just that.
I know one of the, people always want to say, and I think it's a tired comparison. And there are a lot of those out in this world, tired comparisons. But people, whenever they see Joe Burrow, they immediately go to Andrew Luck. And I don't like that comparison because they're very different. But let's just use another comparison. I know Paul Dehner Jr. on the Growler, he's used this comparison a lot, of a quarterback who was labeled as quote unquote injury prone earlier on in his career. And that's Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford, his rookie season, 10 games. His second season, 3 games. Okay, so he played 13 games in his first 2 seasons. Seasons after that, 16, 16, 16, 16, 16, 16, 16, 16, 16. He's played pretty much every single game in his career. He played every game between 2011 and 2018. Every single game. So it's just like there are plenty of examples of quarterbacks just getting hurt. And in my eyes, it's just one of these things, like, it's just flukish in a way sometimes with these injuries. Because last year, who are we having this discussion about being, quote unquote, an injury-prone quarterback? Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
But Lamar Jackson plays the entire season, and now you don't hear anybody saying anything about that. It's just easy to point fingers when people, and I think if you look at Lamar and Joe, they've probably missed pretty similar amounts of times throughout their NFL careers.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, I think Joe's actually missed more time than Lamar has. Because, I mean, Lamar, before 2021, I mean, 2018 through 2020, I don't think he missed a scheduled start. So, yeah, I think it has more to do with how they play the position, is how people think, that these quarterbacks are injury prone. I mean, I know you don't like the Andrew Luck comparison, but honestly, I mean, they do him and Burrow did kind of have similar styles where they kind of put it all out there on the field every single game, kind of throwing their body out there. I think you remember in 2021 after the Packers game, right? Burrow had issues on scrambles where he wouldn't slide. He took some nasty hits. Aaron Rodgers even said after the game, you have to play the position smarter in that respect. You have to. Yeah. You're too talented not to protect your body.
He got a throat contusion because of it, which I didn't even know was a thing. I didn't know you could get a contusion on your throat. I mean, it makes sense, but I just didn't know that was a thing. Because if you remember, that was the game that Joe Burrow's not doing post-game. He's in an ambulance on the way to the hospital.
Yeah.
And I think all of us were like, oh my God, what is happening?
So that's where I think like the Andrew Luck comparisons are a little more valid. Like, just because of some of these injuries are just freak injuries, right? The throat contusion is pretty much unheard of, right? I've never heard of a quarterback sustaining a throat contusion injury. Or
for me, what bugs me about the Luck comparison is that I think Burrow and Luck are just wired differently.
They are. No, I think, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, and I think because people always want to say, oh, well, Burrow's just going to retire early because just like Andrew Luck, or he's going to be forced to retire early. I don't know that there's anything that would force Joe Burrow to retire. Other than father time.
Yeah.
Because I just think he is wired here. John says, to me, there was clearly a bounty on Burrow by the Ravens after Logan Wilson took out Andrews. And see, that's the thing. I don't necessarily agree with that because I think the wrist injury was a fluke.
No. And also, we talk about Burrow being stubborn. I'm pretty sure Burrow hurt his hand before, he threw the ball that ended up tearing the wrist ligament, right? I mean, he got tackled by Jadeveon Clowney where his wrist kind of landed weird. You could tell in the game footage that was something that was he tweaked it or something during that.
It was bothering him.
It was bothering him, and then he goes out and throws a pass, and that's what happens. I mean, so when you have to listen to when he says you have to listen to your body more, it's situations like that where, oh, hey, I tweaked my wrist, getting tackled by Jadeveon Clowney. Maybe I should have that looked at before I go back on the field and throw it and then end up tearing the ligament completely.
And I hope he's learned his lesson when it comes to that, and I think he has. With that,
I think he's been a lot more vocal about it too. He's definitely been more vocal about that aspect, and hopefully maybe that's what he needed. What happened in that Ravens game was the wake-up call that he needed in that respect.
And I think that's a good terminology to use. Do you have any quarterback stats?
I don't really have any quarterback stats. So just previewing the quarterback position, I was kind of looking at the schedule, right? And the Bengals, in terms of looking at past defenses, they've got some fairly, I think, easy matchups. You're going up against defenses like the Panthers, who I think will be improved.
But they lost their best defensive lineman.
They did. Well, I don't know. Brian Burns, he racks up the sack numbers, but it wasn't like his pressure rate was that great. But and also they replaced him with a Jadeveon Clowney, who had a much better season last year than Brian Burns did. But there's still a work in process on defense. The Raiders coverage unit is an absolute mess. They're playing them this year. Their pass rush is decent. But I mean, that's really just Max Crosby and a little bit of Malcolm Kuntz. I mean, that's not, a crazy hard matchup. My note here, the Broncos ... LMAO. So yeah, they play the Broncos. That
Commanders.
Defense is an absolute train wreck. So the Commanders are an interesting one, right? I think the Commanders could be a lot better than than a lot of people think they'll be, just because of the addition of Dan Quinn and what he's done with the Cowboys defense. They also added some decent pieces like Dorrance Armstrong. I know Cleveland Farrell's kind of been a bust in terms of where he was selected as the 4th overall pick. But him going into Dan Quinn's system, I think that could be interesting. And then Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu being added as linebackers in the linebacker room, that would be, I think that's an interesting defense for them to play against. I don't think that's going to be an easy matchup. Now, one matchup I think is going to be very interesting to watch is both of the Ravens matchups, because the Ravens lost some key players and coaches. They lost Mike McDonald to the Seattle Seahawks. They obviously lost Geno Stone to us. They lost Patrick Queen to the Steelers. They lost Jadeveon Clowney, who I think was their probably their best defensive player last year. So yeah, seeing the turnover they have on that side of the ball and how they respond to it, there's no given that they're going to be as good of a defensive unit as they were last season.
And you can say, go on.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you can say the same thing about the Cowboys too. Is will they take a step back in losing Dan Quinn? And who do they replace him with? Oh, that's right, that guy. We know him, Mike Zimmer, right?
Yeah, but the thing is, and it's and I kind of have the same note with Zimmer as I do with Vic Fangio, is that I think you are seeing defenses evolve right now. Kind of the best comparison I can have is Vic Fangio, was one of the best defensive minds of the 2010s, but people are starting to adapt to the Mike McDonald defense and what he did with Baltimore. And part of me wonders how stubborn are these older defensive coordinators like Mike Zimmer, like Vic Fangio with the Eagles, are going to be too slow to adapt, and could that hamper their defensive play? So yeah, but they are playing against some decent, really good defenses. You got to play Cleveland twice a year. Obviously, the first week matchup last year was an absolute train wreck on the offensive side of the ball for the Bengals. And then the Chiefs. I mean, I don't think they really had much turnover other than L'Jarius Sneed last year. And Spags is still locked in as the defensive coordinator and has done a pretty good job there, throughout his tenure in Kansas City.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting, and I'm looking forward to here in a couple of weeks too, when we dive all the way into all of these teams deeper, because the AFC North, and again, I think we talked about this last week or the week before. It is just so fascinating. It is so fascinating because there's so many moving parts, and there's so many questions. Is Burrow healthy? What the hell are the Steelers going to do? A quarterback? How big of a loss is Mike McDonald? Does Deshaun Watson actually suck? And those are just one basic question for all of these teams, but there's so many more, and I'm fascinated to go into that. Let's go to the Bengals running back position here. I got 2 questions for you, Mick, and then we can hit into some stats as well and what you've learned. And the first one is, will the Bengals miss Joe Mixon?
I don't think they will. Now, I loved what Joe Mixon did with the team. I think he was a great franchise player. Played 7 years here. But I think that he left some to be desired, especially last year. And, and I'll break out some stats here. So if we're comparing Zach Moss, Chase Brown, and Joe Mixon, breakaway run percentage last year. These are runs, percentage of runs that went for 15 yards or more out of their total attempts. Zach Moss, 26%. Chase Brown was at 50%, which that can be kind of adjusted skewed based on the amount of snaps that he had.
Let me guess Joe Mixon's number. I don't know this. Is it below 5%?
No, it's not below 5. It's not high though. It's 16.2%.
Okay, gosh, I wouldn't have even thought it was that high.
Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of on the lower end of running backs. Yards after contact, and this has been the biggest thing, where Joe Mixon's ranked towards the bottom of the league at 2.51 yards after contact. Zach Moss, not too much better, but 2.79, and then Chase Brown, 3.27 yards after contact. But the one thing that I think is a question mark with this Bengals running back room, and I don't think their ball security is too bad between Moss and Brown, but that's the one thing Joe Mixon had that he was probably better than every other running back in the league, is how he took care of the football. I don't think he had 1 fumble, I think, in 7 seasons in Cincinnati. That's an impeccable stat. And then I think Joe Mixon, he was a decent receiver in the backfield. Now, Chase Brown's receiving numbers last year were, for the amount of snaps that he had, were absolutely incredible. Yards per route run. So for a good wide receiver, Sam, a good yards per route run number, or like best in the league, is somewhere right around 3 or maybe just above it. Chase Brown, 4.46 yards per route ran, which is...
That's elite.
That's outrageously high. Now, it's definitely not going to be that high because he's going to have more snaps in 2024 than in 2023. And then also a lot of that was with the Jake Browning playbook, where it was probably a little more simplified, probably a lot more design passes to the running back. We know that Joe Burrow is not going to have passes to the running back at that high of a rate. But that's just crazy stat.
But if he's getting that much yards per reception, or yards per target, he might be more willing to go that way.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I think it had more to do with scheme than anything, but I think Brown did show a really good ability to be a decent pass catching back. So I don't think the Bengals are going to miss Joe Mixon that much in 2024. I think the run game on paper should be more explosive. I think that Chase Brown, we've heard reports that he's had a lot of improvement over the offseason. And I think the explosion numbers are definitely there. It's just, can we get him to be, or can the Bengals coaching staff get him to be that good on a consistent basis? I'm excited to see what the running back room can do. Then also, hopefully the run blocking gets a lot better, because it hasn't been that great, Really, I can't tell you the last time it's really been that good.
Barring injury, which of the two running backs, Zach Moss or Chase Brown, will have more snaps at the end of the season?
I think Chase Brown could. I really do think he could.
Let's go percentage. What are you saying percentage wise?
Snaps?
Yes.
Say I'd say 60-40.
So Josh says Moss will have more snaps. And I think it's going to be really close, like 55-45, 60-40. And that's why I think the first, because I think, and I would assume you'd agree with me, Mick, that the first 4 weeks will be more Moss.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but it's potential that by the time December 1 rolls around, that it is, and I'm pretty sure that's the game against the Steelers. In fact, I could just say that, I have it right in front of me. The game against the Steelers, yes, is December 1, that it might be more Chase Brown. And that might not be necessarily a shot at Zach Moss. It might just be how it's going along when it comes to that. So yeah, I think that it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Let's go wide receivers here. Chase Higgins, they're back. You've got the younger guys as well, but I want to ask you here is, and this is something we've talked a lot about over these last couple of months, but I think it's worth revisiting going into our offensive preview here is, how do you think Jermaine Burton is going to fit?
I think he's going to fit him really well. Now, whether that's on the outside or in the slot, I think that he's kind of interchangeable, a lot like a Jamar Chase is interchangeable. So I think between those two, I think you're going to see them kind of switching around positions quite a bit in the 2024 season. But I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think I've ever been more excited about the wide receiver room than I have for this season because of how much of a talent I think Jermaine Burton is. This guy was a first-round talent that, because of some character concerns, fell all the way to the third round. And I really think that, he couldn't have gone to a better locker room to kind of foster his maturity than the Cincinnati Bengals locker room. So I think as long as he can kind of keep his head on straight, buy into the culture, Jermaine Burton is an up-and-coming star in this league. And I'm talking potentially Puka Nacua type of season. That's how good I think he is. And also, you got to think Chase and Higgins are going to be, the coverage units are going to be looking at those two a lot more than they're going to be looking at Jermaine Burton. That gives Jermaine a ton of opportunity to show what he's made of as an NFL wide receiver.
And that's, to me, the biggest thing with this is, and I know we talked about this when we talked a little fantasy football, whenever that was, a couple of weeks ago. To me, Burton might be, other than the big guys, your neighbors and so on, he is such an attractive fantasy football option, especially for where you're going to get him. As far as a value pick, I think he is, if you're looking at him there in those mid rounds, I'm jumping on.
Yeah. No, he is one of my most sought after targets in fantasy this year.
Yep, without question when it comes to that. But I think I know you love PFF grades, and really, you look at his PFF grades from last year at Alabama. He really only had 2 quote-unquote bad games that he rated in the 50s as far as PFF last year. One of those was South Florida. And I don't know if you remember that game for Alabama, Mick, but that's when they literally played like 75 quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And that, you can kind of put an asterisk by that. And then the other one was against Michigan, who won the national title. So Other than that, he was really, really good last year, including his best game, not counting the game against Chattanooga, was against Texas A&M, who is, traditionally a really solid defense. John asks, does it not depend on the offensive line doing their job? We're going to get into the offensive line here in a couple of minutes, but I'm assuming this is about the running back position. So let's take this question and let's throw it here in a couple of minutes when we dive into the offensive line. Riley writes in and says, if Burton can show strong hands that Boyd had in his first season, he'll solidify himself as the 3. He's got the intangibles to excel 100%. If he can have Tyler Boyd's early Bengals hands, then he's got a chance to be elite.
Which is crazy. I don't think he had a drop. Did he have a drop last year?
I think he
had
did.
A drop. Let's see.
You look that up while I go into this next question, I think, when it looks at the wide receivers. And
okay, I already have the number.
Okay, go.
Out of 169 targets throughout his collegiate career, Jermaine Burton has had 2 drops.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking about Tyler Boyd last year.
Actually, 4 drops. 4 drops.
Yes, I thought you were talking about Tyler Boyd last year.
No, but Jermaine Burton did not have a drop last season at Alabama. We can look at Tyler Boyd in a second here. But go ahead and continue.
Well, we talk a lot about Burton. We talk a lot about Chase. We talk a lot about Higgins. We talk a lot about Gesicki and so on, and some of these other tight ends that we'll talk about here in a moment as well. But kind of flying under the radar is you've got your 2 sophomores of Andre Yoshivas and Charlie Jones. And really, I think Yoshi's kind of like in between those two, but I really think Charlie Jones, Chuck Sizzle, as they call him, he's really flying under the radar. Nobody's talking about him. What are your realistic expectations for those 2?
So I don't know how high they're going to be just because of how much of a talent I think Jermaine Burton is, and I think he's going to win that wide receiver 3 position pretty easily. But yeah, I think Charlie Jones could definitely get some eyeballs or get some looks in the slot wide receiver position. I mean, that is his natural position. Now we didn't really see him much on the field. When he was at Purdue, he was an absolute star wide receiver. Him and Aidan O'Connell were a really good duo together there. So I mean, he's definitely kind of intriguing to watch, but I don't know if I don't see him having more production than Jermaine Burton. I don't see Yoshi having more production than Jermaine Burton.
You hope not.
No.
Because I think them having more production than Jermaine Burton is not a good thing. And that's nothing against Andre Yoshivas and Charlie Jones. But that to me says something has gone wrong with Jermaine Burton, whether he's gotten hurt or he's just not developed at all. I think, if Andre Yoshivas is your wide receiver 4, you're feeling pretty good. And then the other guy that we haven't even talked about, Mr. Consistent himself, is Trenton Irwin.
Yeah. I mean, the wide receiver room is incredibly deep this year.
It's the best it's been in a long time.
Yeah.
In my eyes, it absolutely has. And I mean, you could also throw into this category, and we can kind of combine the two as far as pass catchers is that this is far and away the best tight end room that Joe Burrow has had. And it's probably not even close. I mean, we have Gesicki, and you've got Drew Sample, who, is kind of your H-back of sorts that he kind of shifted into at times last year. You've got potentially Tanner Hudson, you depending on how that goes, and then you've got Eric All and you've got McLaughlin as well. It's going to be really interesting how all of those guys develop into that tight end position.
I'm also just really happy that we're going to have a little bit of stability in the tight end room, right? I feel like the past few years you've had all of your tight ends on either having 1 year remaining on their deals or they were signed to 1-year contracts or whatnot. Now you have 2 guys that should be locked up for the next 4 years in Eric All and Tanner McLaughlin. You have Mike Gesicki, who has had a track record of success in the league. Now the last 2 years haven't been great. New England, he was dealing with piss poor quarterback play from Mac Jones and also your boy.
No, it was Mac Jones. It was Mac Jones. It was all Mac Jones' fault.
Okay,
all Mac Jones' fault.
And then I've talked about this with Irv Smith being out. I wasn't a huge fan of the Irv Smith signing. I may be a little biased, but I think that Burrow thrives with a more prototypical build at tight end. Irv Smith was on the smaller side, at 6'2", 230, 240 pounds. But you have a guy like Mike Gesicki who is, could be playing basketball right now at 6'6", 245 pounds. They've talked about him being a big slot receiver. That Joe Burrow likes to use 5 wide receiver sets and likes to spread the ball out. I think Mike Gesicki is a great tight end to have in that type of a scheme. I wasn't a huge fan of the signing at first, but I've grown to be kind of bullish on what Mike Gesicki can be for this offense and what he can be for Joe Burrow.
I think that there is I just think it's the perfect fit for the guy that he needs. And it also gives them the great opportunity that the guys like Eric All and McLaughlin, you don't need them right away.
No.
And that's a great thing that they can learn under Gesicki. And I mean, listen, if Gesicki goes out there and has a season like people thought he would have when he was drafted a couple of years ago out of Penn State, I mean, then he probably goes somewhere else and gets paid. But then you have a great problem to have where you have multiple great tight ends.
Yeah, and then the other good problem that the Bengals have had over the past few years kind of just keeps churning, or it keeps cycling, right? Where we just take these reclamation projects at tight end that have either shown track records of success in college or in the league at various points, and they end up playing really well for us and signing big deals with other teams. So I think that's also another thing to keep in mind.
I mean, let's be real. Joe Burrow has played with one tight end worth anything, and that guy's name was Thad Moss. Shout out to Schubert. He's retired though, so we can talk about him there. Do you have any stats when it comes to pass catchers? So you want to jump into the offensive line?
Not a lot of stats. I mean, Jermaine Burton again, really explosive. Second highest average depth of target amongst all wide receivers in college football last year, which I think just kind of speaks to the direction that the Bengals offense wants to head. Mike Gesicki, we've seen good track record of success with him in Miami, more notably before Tyreek got there in 2022. And then also has had pretty sure hands. I mean, last year, I don't think Mike Gesicki dropped the ball either, which is something that I think that Joe
and he
Burrow
had Mac Jones throwing him balls.
Yeah.
Which means that he probably
didn't have a lot of opportunity to drop balls because they were nowhere close to him, So
well, that is probably an accurate thing. Offensive line, your favorite thing to talk about, Mick. I know you just love talking about your boy Frank Pollock, which I do want to make a point to you about Frank Pollock because I'm not sure if you heard it. I want to ask you first, right now, Mick, just a one-name answer. Who will be the right tackle against the Patriots?
Trent Brown.
Who will be the right tackle, let's just say when the Bengals play the Cowboys in December?
Barring injury, I still think it's Trent Brown.
Okay, so you think it'll be Trent Brown barring an injury all season?
Yeah, I think it should be. The thing with Mims is that, he had really good numbers at Georgia, only allowing one pressure last year. But the thing is that one that should be adjusted for inflation because, I mean, it was, even though it was, he played in an SEC team, he was still playing college ball, but it really should be adjusted for inflation because of who he played against. The only teams that he played against last year were UT Martin, which not even an FBS school, Ball State, a MAC school, South Carolina, who was, I think, pretty mid towards the ass end of the SEC, Ole Miss, which was, I think, his worst game. Or maybe that was the Tennessee game. I can't remember. But
Ole Miss is one of his. Actually, his worst game was against. Well, I guess if you're talking, his pass blocking grade, yes, was Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. Which maybe that was because he was going against James Pierce. That's a pretty tough guy to go up against. But and then also Georgia Tech. So it's not like he had that many games against top level SEC play other than Ole Miss. So that's a huge thing. So, I mean, Mims didn't play a lot of snaps in college. For sure didn't play a lot of snaps against top-level competition. I think it'd be in everyone's best interest if he can sit as long as he can and learned under Trent Brown, who is still a quality offensive tackle in the league. It's not like, Trent Brown has had bad seasons leading up to him signing with Cincinnati. I mean, last year graded fairly decently, graded 73 in a pass blocking grade. His pass blocking efficiency is a 97. Run blocking game is really good at an 81. So
the thing with Trent Brown is what we've already seen. Injury prone, and I don't know if character is the right word, but there's a little bit of like extracurriculars or just, I don't even know the word to describe it. There's just a little bit there with Trent Brown. Want Like, it's just kind of one of those question marks that's around him, and that's the reason why the Bengals got him so cheap. Now, you did mention Mims. Now, if you go the year prior, I mean, he did play 57 snaps in the SEC championship against LSU. He was phenomenal in the college football playoff against Ohio State. Had an 84 pass blocking grade against Ohio State in the playoff.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, I don't know if I can count any PFF grades from that TCU game, because I think that was against the local high school. At least that's what Georgia made TCU look like. Was it 67-6 or something?
So I don't know how much. 63-7, but yeah,
it was an old fashioned rear end kicking. But he does at least have some. But I do agree with you that I think Trent Brown is the starter, barring injury, and in that
which is very likely to happen, by the way. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I've talked about this ad nauseum at least once a podcast, it feels like. But I mean, people talk about Teron Armstead being that really good offensive tackle that misses, significant portions of seasons. I mean, Trent Brown is in that same stratosphere as a Teron Armstead in terms of when he plays on the field, he's really good, but he has to be on the field in order to do that, and he's missed significant portions of time at various points in his career.
Agreed. The other guy that I see a lot about, and I'm very curious about, is Cordell Volson, and I've got some stats here for you, Mick. Start to last year for Cordell Volson was not good. Not good at all. Through the first 4 weeks of the season, his pass blocking grades, and I just use pass blocking because to me that's the most important when it comes to this Bengals offensive line. We're going to dive into the run blocking aspect of it here in a moment, but I just want to talk about pass blocking. First 4 weeks, he averaged a 24.4. Now, Mick, you're a lot more of a PFF expert than I am. I fully admit that. That's pretty darn bad. That's pretty bad. Mm-hmm. Now, in that 4, he did have a big old 0 grade against the Rams. Now, that can be a little bit of, if you want to put an asterisk, because who was he blocking there? Oh, yes, maybe the greatest interior defensive lineman of all time. So you can at least say, okay, maybe you shouldn't have gotten a 0.
But really, those first 4 weeks, and sorry to cut you off there. I mean, he was going up. It wasn't just Aaron Donald. Really he was going up against top-level competition those first 4 weeks of the season, right? So Cleveland going up against, I mean, Myles Garrett's an edge rusher, but he was lining up inside at various points in that game. Also going up against other nasty members of that defensive line. Baltimore, you had to deal with Michael Pierce as the nose tackle and Matt Abuike, who was playing as the 3-4 defensive end. Both of those guys have had very good top end level of play in Baltimore. Obviously, Aaron Donald in week 3. Now, I don't know how this is the case. He had an 80.9 offensive grade. His run blocking grade was pretty good, but his pass blocking was bad. And I mean, he was going up against Jeffrey Simmons that week. So
in Tennessee.
So I think Cordell Volson's a very interesting prospect to watch, player to watch this year.
Let me with this too is he started off really bad, but after Joe Burrow got hurt, and I think this is just a coincidence with how it is, but there might be some correlation between the two. After that, his average PFF grade through those games was a 72.7. If he finished the year 72.7 last year, he would have been the 19th ranked guard in the NFL last year. And to me, Mick, if Cordell Volson comes out and is the 19th best guard in the NFL this year, this Bengals offensive line is going to be pretty decent. He does not need to be much better than that.
Yeah. So one thing that people tend to think, especially from PFF, where the biggest jumps you see usually in a lot of other position groups, the biggest jump you see from season to season amongst position groups is from year 1 to year 2. Offensive line's a little more delayed, right? Usually your jump doesn't come until year 3. Now, we kind of saw that towards the tail end of 2023 in Cordell's second season. But the one, I guess to play devil's advocate, or the one question I have here is it a scheme thing with Cordell Volson? Was the scheme that they were running under Jake Browning more offensive line friendly or more friendly to Cordell Volson, where they were running a little more play action, running a lot more under center, or playing having more snaps under center, whereas Joe Burrow likes to be in the gun. He likes to be spread out, where the offensive linemen have to anchor a lot quicker or more to an extent than they did in the Jake Browning style of offense. So I don't know if it's a style thing. I don't know if maybe the year 2 to year 3 jump kind of fulfilled itself towards the back end of 2023. I just think it's going to be very fascinating to see how he plays from the jump. And I do think that he does warrant another year of starting to see if he can make that jump.
Yeah, I think it's it's one of those, if we're listing questions on this offense, he is a question. Because if he isn't, then he's going to need to be replaced next year. Like, this is his year. Like, if he comes out and he has a year similar to what he has been doing and doesn't show any signs of improvement, he's probably going to be done. Now, you're probably saying, okay, who deserves some of the blame with that? Well, it's your boy, your favorite person, I think, on the earth. I think he's right behind your wife as far as people you just love to death. That's Frank Pollock. Have you gotten your Frank Pollock jersey yet?
No, I have not.
So I want to bring this to you, and I don't know if you heard it on. I know you listen to the Growler sometimes, but you're not a religious listener. But they did a podcast. It was last week, I believe, where they talked about their favorite game, and they went back and they rewatched Dan Hort's favorite game, and it was the playoff win against the Raiders. And they talked about that, and Dan Hort made a pitch for Frank Pollock in it. And it was hilarious because I'm listening to him make this pitch, and I almost sent it to you immediately because I just heard you throughout this entire time and everything you've said about Frank Pollock. But Dan Hort's point, and part of this is, and I love Dan Hort. We met him. Very, very nice guy. Very nice man. I'd love to have him on the podcast. Maybe we can reach out and set that up at some point. He's probably friends with Frank Pollock. So that probably does have a little bit that he's coming to defend his friend. But what he said is that Frank Pollock deserves more credit from fans. And his reasoning was because that what he did in the playoffs in 2021 and 2022 was pretty much a work of art, considering what the hell he had to work with. I mean, you look at that Bengals offensive line in the Super Bowl. How the hell did that make the Super Bowl? And so Dan Hort's argument is that Frank Pollock deserves more credit because he was able to make that work somewhat, especially when you look that, I mean, out of those guys, one is still in the NFL. Well, I guess Hakeem Adeniji might still be technically in the NFL, but really only Jonah Williams is still in the NFL.
So, I mean, if Dan Hort wants to hang his hat on the playoff success, I mean, that's his opinion, and you know, and
I found it an interesting quote unquote devil's advocate, if you want to say.
Here's my problem. Here's my problem with Frank Pollock. And you know, my headline with this offensive line is, on paper, this should be the best offensive line that Joe Burrow has ever had. The issue I have with that comment is that we have said this the past 2 seasons. We've said this the past 2 seasons, Sam. In 2022, they revamped the offensive line, right? They signed Ted Karras. They signed Alex Kappa. They signed Lyle Collins, and then adding Cordell Volson and then having Jonah at the left tackle position. Per PFF grades, the Bengals ranked 31st in pass block grade in the 2022 regular season, and 21st in run block grade. So what do? They go out and get the most sought-after offensive tackle in the free agent market before the 2023 season. They go and get Orlando Brown. We saw a little bit of improvement in 2023, but they still weren't a great offensive line. 22nd in pass block grade and 22nd in run block grade in 2023. So the thing that tells me is that this might be talent agnostic for Frank Pollock. I mean, we've seen underperforming offensive lines the past 2 seasons when on paper they should have been, I think, much better than what they ended up being.
And I'm not necessarily agreeing with Dan Hort's point,
but
I was just like, well, that's an interesting point, and one I hadn't really considered. And I sat there and I thought about it, and I said, well, it's not. I mean, he's not wrong. It's an opinion, but I don't think it's necessarily the most outlandish thing I've heard on the internet.
I don't know. It's kind of outlandish now that I think about it. I mean, the Raiders game. I mean, they weren't dealing with the good pass rush in that game. In the playoffs, Titans. How many sacks? 9.
I think it was only 7.
I thought it was 9. I think it's
7 or
9
8.
sacks.
I don't know. I'll give it a Google.
Let's look up the box score. Chiefs game was a little bit better, but they didn't. I don't think that their defense was.
Okay, you're right. 9.
I don't think their defense is the greatest in the league. And then the Rams game, where their grade as a unit was a 14.5 in the pass blocking.
Yeah, but again, let's talk about that offensive line that played in the Super Bowl. Trey Hopkins.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
I mean, let's be real. Bobby Hart would be better than most of those guys on that offensive line. Cordy Glenn would probably be better than most of those guys in the Bengals offensive line.
Any rational thinking person giving praise to a guy that let his offensive line give up 9 sacks in a playoff game.
But they won.
Yeah, they rode the defense and Evan McPherson. And then Joe Burrow made some plays.
They did. And Mike Hilton.
Yeah.
Mike Hilton might have been the player of that game as well. And Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill deserves a lot of credit.
Yeah.
He does. But okay.
He was so good for the Bengals that he had to go to therapy. Okay, what were you saying?
Do you have any other offensive line nuggets or so on that you want to drop in here as we continuing on our offensive look here?
I think I'm completely covered here. I think I've gone through all my notes today.
The final, at least, offensive point that we can at least talk about, we mentioned this a little bit earlier on in the show, because to me, it's also an offensive position, is kicker. Will the Evan McPherson deal get done before the start of the season?
Sure.
Okay. And I agree. And I think it should be done. He deserves it. He's one of the more reliable kickers in the NFL. I think last year, if my memory is right, he did not miss a kick within 50 yards. Not counting, I think he might have missed 1 PAT, but I think he was perfect on kicks from 49 yards in as far as field goals. You're just not going to find kickers who are that reliable in the NFL. So I think he deserves really whatever he wants when it comes to that. That's the Bengals offense. As a whole, I don't know what stat you want to see. If you want to go PFF grade, if you want to go total yards, if you want to whatever it might be, where does this Bengals offense need to rank in the NFL for them to, I don't know if I want to say make the Super Bowl or make a deep run to where you feel good about it? Do you get what I'm asking you?
Yeah, so for the team as an overall to have a sustained level of success, I think they need to be a top 5 offense. Because I'm not too bullish on how the defense is going to be in 2024 with them missing DJ Reader. Now the back end, the safety room can be a little bit better on the defense. So the defense is kind of hard to predict. But I think the offense needs to be a top 5, at the very least a top 10 offense to be for the team to have a sustained level of success this year.
Yeah, and I don't agree. John writes in and he says, I don't think they took enough offensive tackles during the draft to improve the line for Burrow to succeed. I think if you're talking offensive line and as a whole, I think interior, that's a very valid point, because Mick, this is something that we should probably talk about right now is that if this offense has a weakness, it is interior offensive line depth, because really there is none.
There's not a lot. I mean, I think they're moving Trey Hill to the guard position, if I had to guess.
You've got Cody Ford.
You've got Cody Ford, who's probably the most hated player on the Bengals right now.
I don't hate Cody Ford.
I don't hate him. I'm just saying that probably half of the fan base, or at least a third of the fan base, probably is not or not Cody Ford.
Your wife hates him.
Yeah, Sam's not a big Cody Ford, not a big Cody Ford gal right now.
So your New Jersey is not going to be a Cody Ford jersey?
I think I'd be sleeping on the couch if that were the case. So,
well, it was going to happen at some point. Let's be real. You at least have another bedroom that you could probably at least sleep on that bed, unless she kick you out and force you into. You and Rory can sleep on that couch. It's big enough. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. That interior offensive line depth, though, is a concern.
Yeah.
It is a concern for me, and I don't really know how I feel about it moving forward, because if an injury happens to a Ted Karras or an Alex Kappa or Cordell Volson,
I don't know how bad it's going to. I mean, I think that. So I think they got better at the backup center position, right? I think that I'm more confident in Matt Lee taking over the backup center role than I was with Trey Hill. Even though Trey Hill never really took the backup center snaps, I think Max Sharping took those.
He did.
If Ted Karras ever got hurt or whatever. So, the guard positions, I mean, Cody Ford, I think, is a good depth piece in the offensive line. And Trey Hill's probably, probably he could be better at guard than he is at center. Doesn't have more responsibilities that way. So, I don't know.
It is interesting. Mick, you touched on the defense, on some of the questions there, because there are a lot. That's next week's show. We invite you to join us every Wednesday, 8 Eastern. We are going to answer all of the questions that potentially could be asked about the Bengals defense moving forward. There are a lot of them. Interior defense, interior of the defensive line. That's a big question. The corner. Will Dax Hill, will Cam Taylor-Britt, will they all take next steps along with DJ Turner? The safeties, how will that work? How is the mad scientist Lou Anarumo, how is he going to make all of that happen? Are we going to see Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt after not their greatest years last year? I think that's safe to say. Are we going to see them return more to the form of expected next year? Those are a bunch of the topics that we're going to be talking about. And then we'll have to dive deeper into the punter battle again, because why not? Austin McNamara versus Brad Robbins. Who will win? And then Cal Adamitis, too. We didn't shout him out today. He's kind of an offensive player, too. Shout out to Cal.
Yeah.
Shout out to Cal. Most people don't know the name, and that's usually a good thing. Remember, though, to follow us on our social media channels. We're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Give us a 5-star rating, too, on your favorite podcasting platform. We are on there. It really helps us out to do it. We're on Spotify, iTunes, all of it. So make sure you go back, re-listen to the show that way. Any parting thoughts or college football things that you want to mention, Mick?
No. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Yep, we'll see you back here next week. Be safe on your travels. I know you're headed down and mixing a water.
There we go.
Mixing a water.
Pray I don't drown.
Yeah, because I don't know who's on the show with me, so that might be a little bit of a problem. It might be Rory filling in for you, and I don't really know how many points she has to make.
I don't know how many she has. She's sleeping right now.
Oh, Rory the dog. Appreciate you watching, John, too. We hope you'll join us next week. So until next week, Hoo day.
Hoo day.